safe. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mediation Beyond YouTube channel. Today, I'm super excited and honored to have Amanda Luterman. You're in Canada, right, Amanda?
I am. I'm in Montreal, actually just outside of Montreal.
That's awesome. So Amanda has a master's and her master's in education as well from Columbia University. We realize alma maters here. She's a psychotherapist with an interest in eroticism and over 10 years, a decade here, in clinical practice. What I really liked about having Amanda on today was because I found her, a piece written about her, not that she wrote, but it was about her erotic empathy, I don't want to say theory, but approach. And it's an approach to therapy. And so I wanted to have her come on and speak to us. So it's an approach to therapy and relationships that focuses on a mindful perspective, talking as well as distinct separateness as conditions for mutually erotic pleasure. So erotic empathy, and I love the word empathy, is what we're going to be talking about today. So thanks, Amanda, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask, as I do like with most people, is what got you started on the path of eroticism and then obviously coming up with your own erotic empathy?
That's a good question. I originally, I started out at McGill in undergrad doing, studying psychology and women's studies and, really developing that early 20-something feminism and knowing I wanted to be a clinician. So I really thought I was going to work in, issues in women's health predominantly at that time. And then at around, I was 21, starting my master's in New York City. And I developed an interest in working with men. It was sort of my undergrad was characterized more, by that interest in women's health. And then in graduate school, I started realizing, because they were talking about, at that time at least, the homeless male New Yorkers, the number of homeless male New Yorkers had increased. And so that concern that is now, so dialogued as masculinity, as toxic masculinity, was sort of, was really heating up as an important topic of interest in clinical work. And so honestly, the funny thing that I started to say at that time was, based on how I understand women's needs, sexually speaking, and then how I understand men's refusal to engage with vulnerability and the need to be, so distinctly unfeminine, for example, I remember saying to myself, how is it possible that we ever turn each other on or ever erotically connect? Because if women need more tenderness, stereotypically of course, and more so at that time stereotypically than now, this is about 15 years ago, it makes it obviously presents such a clear challenge of interaction. I just thought, how does this ever work?
Right.
And then you throw trauma in, right, whether it's male or female bodied, like childhood trauma around sexuality, for example, or just how we appraise sexuality and what it really means to all genders now, got me interested in eroticism. So not so much sexuality, which is what I thought my interests would be. I thought more about sex therapy at that time in the beginning of my career. And I ended up more in the erotology of things. So understanding the eroticism, the desire quality of relationships, and not so much sexual functioning or pathology of the body specifically.
So what is so is that the delineating piece between, because eroticism, I think, has a, I don't want to say negative connotation, but almost, it kind of almost does, like, oh, it's erotic, like stay away, like those people are into erotic, whatever. And so, but that's not what you're saying here.
No, that's a very good point. Most people hear the word erotic and they hear like, erotic cinema, erotic museum, something a little bit more salacious than something they personally identify with. So they see it as exactly what you just said, something other people do and something other people prioritize. And then particularly if it's a heterosexual, more traditionally minded couple, for example, they may just assume that, they're about love and sex, not eroticism. Right. And in fact, eroticism is really just the interpersonalization of desire, the desire flow. So in order to feel desirable and be desiring, there has to be an erotic dynamic.
So does there have to be an erotic dynamic with self first, and so that it flows to your partner? Or are you saying that eroticism is between the two people? Did
Yeah,
you?
when I use the term erotic dynamic as the as, how do I explain this? The erotic dynamic is really the impact two people have on one another when it comes to their sexual motivation.
Gotcha. Okay.
So things either in your sex life, things either just detract or contribute to motivation to be intimate and to initiate intimacy.
Gotcha.
And what in therapy particularly comes down to that. I mean, what are the things that are creating obstacles or detracting from your potential to be erotic with your partner? So I'll jump the gun here and I'll go right into something
Yeah.
that I always find important to explain. If, let's say, you know, your partner is, you know, just about to go into the shower because they, let's say, just did some gardening outside and they're kind of sweaty and they're not feeling particularly attractive, but you happen to find that little glow in those shorts that they wouldn't ever be seen in public wearing attractive, then you're going to go and initiate, you know, hey, nice shorts, you know, as they're on their way into the shower.
Right.
But unfortunately, and what I hear time and time again, is the person who finds that shorts wearer attractive will choose to not say anything and to not initiate because they know that they're going to be faced with, oh, no, I'm gross. Oh, no, are you kidding? I look disgusting. Or
Yeah.
I don't like. So what happens is that we in ourselves reject our erotic potential. We reject ourselves as an erotic, you know, subject or erotic muse. And in so doing, reject our partners.
Yes. Although it's that almighty fear of rejection.
Well, but that's exactly right. We reject them for fear that once they actually get close enough to how we experience our own body, they will reject us, even though in that moment they are initiating.
Yep.
They are initiating, but we reject them for fear that they will see us the way we see ourselves.
Which goes into when I read the article here. It's called, it's in Psychology Today. If anybody would like to read it, it's in the October 2020 edition. It was written by Dr. Joe Court, where he talks about, it's called The Vital Importance of Erotic Empathy, where he references you and your work, Amanda. It said, and you have a quote here: if you don't feel you can enjoy your own body, it can be difficult to be present with your partner. And I think, especially for women, that is such a huge thing. So if you can't accept yourself, then how you get into your head that your partner is already going to reject you when your partner may not have ever rejected you.
Right.
So it kind of goes back into your shower scene.
Right. Well, and so there you have erotic empathy, because if you're remaining within your own experience of yourself and your body and not able to try on an empathy for your partner's perception of you, then what you're doing in actuality is lacking erotic empathy. You're disallowing them to have an experience of you that is different from your experience of yourself.
Right. So you're lacking erotic empathy for self.
For them, for your partner.
Yeah.
Because you know, let's say I wrote a little blog a few years ago called Carrot Cake. I am Carrot Cake. A lesson in erotic empathy is the name of the article, and it's because my husband loves carrot cake and I don't, and I use erotic empathy as a bit of a, you know, an analogy here, by saying, you know, if I can't understand why anybody wants to eat dessert with carrots in it, you know, I say I keep vegetables out of my dessert. If I can't understand it, then I'm at the risk of becoming one of those people saying like, ew, you like that? And it being hard for him to enjoy it without shame in that moment.
Gotcha.
So I would be lacking empathy for his enjoyment of that delicacy if I show my own preference in that moment. And so take that cake as, you know, I am carrot cake. I don't necessarily understand why he wants to be with me, you know, a whole bunch of the time, but that's not for me to disallow him. I cannot shine shame on his taste,
Right.
and as though there's an authority there. And I think that's one of the things that we see in couples dynamic, that erotic dynamic, is a bit of a disrespect for each other's preference, especially when one partner is a little bit more verbal or a little bit more authoritarian than the other. We end up with one person actually feeling shame for having arousal for their partner when their partner feels that they, what do you mean I got fat over the years? Or, oh, don't be disgusting, I just worked out. That's, I'm
Right.
sweaty. And so they actually feel shame for wanting, right? And so that's one side of it. And the other side of it is even what happens when you want your partner to shower because you're very attracted to them, but they are all sweaty. So how do you allow each other erotic empathy for one another's needs and conditions for effective erotic moments, by again sort of allowing each other to have those preferences. Like, I know you want me right now, I'm gonna go take a quick shower and be right with you, that kind of,
Yeah.
without offense, without resentment or rejection.
Yeah, or come in the shower.
Right? I always end up saying that. I'm like, also save water, shower together.
Would work for me. Just come on in. I mean,
Right? And
right?
that's wonderful. We hope that we can encourage those kinds of things, but a lot of people have these boundaries up around what you do and what you don't do, or the bravery, the sheer courage that it requires to make these initiatives, to take these initiatives with each other, even if people have been together for 30 something years.
Let me ask you this though, and I don't know if I'm going down a different path, and if I am course correct here, but would that be why some people end up watching porn? Because they don't feel that they can be open and honest with whatever it is they like and can't share it with their partner because they're not feeling that empathy, so to speak? Like,
Absolutely.
okay.
Porn is actually, I don't say any erotic stimulation. So it could be some women tell me that they're just a very common thing is people read erotica, so that
Right.
serves the same purpose as porn when we're talking like this. I'm not anti-porn at all. I think
Right.
it's very important inspiration for a lot of people, and it's fun to have a relationship with yourself sexually that involves looking at other people. The Olympic Olympic levels of sexuality are fun to watch. So that's not of course, never to shame that. I always want to include that this is not an anti-porn thing at all. But what you're right. Porn is a very, very convincing and important avenue for people to satiate their sexual urges, because it makes everybody an onlooker. It makes everybody a member of the audience as opposed to a subject. So I often say porn makes us all voyeurs, right? Very rarely are you functioning from yourself as the subject, from yourself as having to perform or to think about somebody else's needs, or to care if your legs are shaved, or if your gut's showing, or whatever it is. It's porn is, it allows us to be in touch with our sensations without interfering, without the interference of interpersonal complication.
Got you.
So when you hear those stories of like, oh, well, her husband always went down to the basement to, rub one out before bed when she was wanting sex from him routinely, we have to ask ourselves what kind of expectations or what kind of interpersonal context was that person avoiding or maybe not comfortable with, that he ultimately chose to satiate his urges without a willing partner.
So there is something inherent in that, though. It is, right? I mean,
avoidance of vulnerability, avoidance of complication, of just all of those obstacles that detract from erotic vulnerability.
Gotcha. And in the article you say, eroticism is about two people wanting to feel desired and desirable with each other. But it says that erotic empathy allows your partner to find you attractive. And so what if you're at a point where you don't find your partner attractive? So is the empathy piece, but your partner, I'm much going back to the shower, but I'm just even saying, what if you're just not into your partner anymore? And how do you re-establish that empathy with each other?
I think the erotic empathy piece here is also that, it comes down to how I remind couples regularly that the person it's not so much about not being attracted anymore. It's the fact that you've forgotten to value, to have empathy for each other erotically. If your partner has sort of, and it's difficult, right? Over time, we age, we change, absolutely. But most often, it's not even the body changes that are an issue so much as the fact that if we feel unattractive in ourselves, we tend to be less generous with affection and with desire flow with our partners. We change because our bodies change. So the problem is not even often I was just watching on TV last night, It's Complicated was on, with Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin, with like the exes and they get back together. Yep. And I love how, there's this appreciation for the fact that their bodies have changed and they sort of drop their clothes in front of one another to just exhibit that. But that's not what happens to their eroticism. It's not about body changes, but there is a need to be erotically empathic about the fact that your partner is the context in which you get to be an erotic person for the rest of your life. And I think people forget that when you get married, you are signing up to be the one person that, most often one, right, person that your partner will exist within as a sexual being for the rest of time. People forget that responsibility. They forget to own that if you don't take care of yourself, well, then what happens to your partner's sex life? And if your interest declines, but it's not that you owe each other that you're supposed to have sex you don't want. No, never. But you're supposed to invest effort into understanding that arousal changes and to keep up with that and to know how each other changes over time. And, I have a 5-month-old. And, even I'm recalling so many positive memories of talking to clients about body changes and realizing it's amazing. I'm certainly learning my rewired self, and figuring out what works and what doesn't. Even though something always worked, well, it doesn't work anymore when something else does. And so, I can only imagine that my partner might feel, aware of those changes with me. And so has got to learn me again, sort of thing.
That's about having those dialogues.
Yes, and it's about taking ownership of that prioritizing of one another, to not become resentful that something doesn't work, even though it always did. Right. But actually choosing to say, okay, this is the next chapter of us. All right, let's do this.
And how do we work with that?
How do we adapt? How do we evolve? Yes, relationships are always in evolution, whether it's financial, whether it's, around family, around space. I've moved also. So how do we now understand space with one another, considering that, we have more of it, but how do we remain connected? And so there's those kinds of concerns. And I think that's a strong part of erotic empathy, is choosing to remain understanding that separateness between you is really, really key, because if you make the mistake of sort of uniting into one union of, oh, it's just us, it's our marriage, it's our relationship, and losing that individuality, you, by definition, begin to lack a distinctly important understanding of each of you as individual beings with specific needs and specific conditions in order to keep that eroticism that you require illuminated in your relationship and keep it effective.
Well, and you'll relate to this because you're in that stage of life. But, as when you're married and it's just the two of you, that's a different thing. You bring a child into it. It obviously it changes. You bring another child, each time you're changing the dynamic. So if we had people watching this and they're like, we have a couple of kids, we're parents now, and, their intimacy gets put on that back burner. And how do people, because I think it's so important, how do people bring it forward so that it is a priority? Like, do they start being able to have conversations with each other? Right. Just send them to a therapist? Like, where do they go?
Where do they go when they feel that their intimacy is on the back burner because of the flow of stresses and pressures and tasks at hand? Yeah, I absolutely recommend that everyone talk to somebody before it's a last straw, before divorce or something. I mean, really, when you're starting to feel disconnected, when you're starting to feel disappointed, we often, I have a colleague friend of mine who's a urologist, and I've mentioned to him, how the majority of cases of erectile dysfunction are actually erectile disappointment. They're not erectile dysfunction because it works just fine when he's alone, most often. But when there's pressure, when you're having sex only once every, so often, there's an increased pressure of it needing to go well. And so, do you hear my little one in the background?
I do. Do you need to go?
Let's give it 2 more minutes.
Okay.
He's talking to his mobile a little bit
Okay.
first. So, but you'll see that there's real talk on, on our interview. I love it. But yeah, when you start to notice imperfections and disconnection, that's the right time to really hone your skills of communication and erotic empathy for your couple moving forward. It's when there's already a lengthy period of disconnection that we're chipping away at the scar tissue on top of the original wound, and that's what takes longer. That's what I find is going to chew up your therapy money is the time you waited. So at any given point, when one person doesn't feel so good, I tell every couple, be willing to go to three sessions, therapy sessions. Yeah, sort of unpack it a little bit.
And do people need to go to a sex therapist to do that? Or would you say they can go to kind of anybody to kind of do that? Or, I mean, couples?
I would go to whoever you choose to go to together first and foremost. So if it feels specifically in nature, if you feel that your arguments come up after sex, or that's the focus, then talk to a sex therapist.
Okay.
Or talk to someone who's able to dialogue those concerns. I would not focus on couples communication when it's specifically contextualized to intimacy. I mean, it's usually more than just sex. Usually it's the fact that, sex is the only time the couple touches, for instance, which is problematic. And anyway, so there you are.
So with erotic empathy, really be able to see things from your partner's lens.
Yes.
Not only just your lens, believe in what your partner sees.
Yep.
And if you're getting—
allow them to see what they see, even if it's not what you see. Allow your partners to have their feelings, to have the meaning they attribute to their feelings be different from the meaning you feel they should attribute to those feelings. Allow each person their unique experience of relationship in order to feel valid and whole, and vulnerable.
So if your partner says you're beautiful, you're hot, you're whatever, believe them.
Let them find you hot. Don't believe, it's not about believing them. Don't feel reassured. I actually don't, I sort of work in contradiction to self-esteem literature, where I don't believe we should be reassuring each other and then believing that we actually earn the compliments that our partner chooses to give to us. I actually just believe we should say thank you, or I joke, we should actually say you're welcome. When your partner says you look beautiful, say you're welcome, because you're looking at me, I'm not looking at me. I'm happy you're enjoying it. Allow it to be their experience. And now I've got to go.
No problem.
But,
all right, thank you.
And absolutely. So
we'll connect again. Go get your baby.
Thank you, Colleen. Looking forward to keeping in touch.
Well, take care. Bye-bye.